Fear and hunger. I jump down a toilet and I die. I talk to a stranger, I die. I walk down a hallway, I die. I try to go to sleep and oh, guess what? I die. This is how my journey in fear and hunger began. Stuck inside of a toilet to slowly pass away in a pile of shit. Now, I've played a lot of games, but the RPG genre never really stood out to me. My thick head and YouTube Shorts level attention span made it impossible to stay focused on turn-based combat. However, entering the dungeon of fear and hunger brought something out of me that I had not felt in a long time. Curiosity. Every run that I did in this game just brought out more intrigue inside me. What is behind this door? What if I won that coin flip? Why is this girl held in a cage? Each and every secret held inside this game was gnawing at me. Coming from the dark and twisted mind of your average Finnish guy,
The hell with you.
Fear and Hunger is an extremely punishing game, and at no point does it hold your hand. I learned this the hard way, just like you will if you take the time to dive into this franchise, which I think you really should, because today I want to tell you why I think Fear and Hunger is the perfect survival horror game that also loves to torture you, but I could not put it down. Starting Fear and Hunger offers you a choice. Play the intro or skip it. Normally, I would skip these as my goal is to just get to gameplay. I love gameplay, I want gameplay. But in this case of Fear and Hunger, I decided to play it. Here we learn about the characters that we'll be adventuring with. Cahara is a mercenary that relies on dirty tactics to get what he wants. What has led him to the dungeon of Fear and Hunger is the bounty set on a man named Legard. Cahara is fast and agile and all around the best character to play as for beginners, as he can run away easily from everything and has the ability lockpicking, which allows him to access essentially all doors in the dungeon. Then there is Dars, clearly inspired by Jeanne d'Arc, the dutiful knight, and on the search to save her leader, the renowned Legard, same guy that the bounty is on. But either way, he's the leader of the Knights of the Midnight Suns, a group of knights that go around just slaughtering people. And guess what? Dars is the best option if you're going to be going for combat first, as she offers armor and weapons that are far more effective. Enki, we don't talk about Enki. And finally, the Mega Chad, Ultra Deluxe, fucking Gigalord of the North, Rundvalder! Now, each four of these souls has come to the dungeon on the search for something, and we experience playing as all four of them by recruiting them while exploring the dungeon as members of our party, or we can also kill them. It's really up to what you want to do. Choosing Cahara, though, we have to answer a few questions. These will determine certain skills available to us. If we answer honorably, well, we just get silver, but if we are scummy and betray our friends, well, we're going to be rewarded with awesome abilities like Dash. Dropped in front of the dungeon, we have no information. No guide, nothing to tell us where to go. The outside is quiet, the ambience almost suffocating. We check all the boxes containing nothing more than the occasional food item, but in the distance, howling can be heard. If we leave, we won't find out what happens when the sounds eventually reach us. These are the hounds, an enemy type that we could have easily avoided if we simply didn't loiter around for too long, but I assume that just like most dog enemies in other games, these things should not be that difficult to defeat. But that's far from it. Don't underestimate anything in this game, because these things will punish you for making bad assumptions. And I love it. Whereas most horror games would simply use the sound of the dogs to trick you into this kind of false sense of fear, as the real danger won't ever even show up because it's just a sound file, whereas Fear and Hunger actually makes that distant, ominous noise a reality. However, if we instead ignore the hounds, we can enter the front gate of the dungeon, where we find ourselves on level 1. We take a moment to explore. The whole place carries this strange silence. Remnants of past people can be found all around, and clearly not everything seems to be in order around here, until we run into him. Our first proper enemy. These are the guards. And yes, that giant thing is exactly what you think it is. It's a big old stinger.
Our daddy taught us not to be ashamed of our dicks.
This might be a good time to talk about the combat in this game, because, oh dear lord, it is interesting. Now, as I mentioned, turn-based combat, not really something I enjoy. I think it's boring. The time between the turns, the constant spells and items you have to keep track of. It is so boring that even you are currently falling asleep. Hey, wake the fuck up! No time for sleep, because Fear and Hunger's combat system is so much more engaging than most I've tried. You see, in regular RPGs, you usually take turns to hit the enemy, and an attack has a random RNG chance of hitting or missing and usually hits an entire target. But not in Fear and Hunger. You see, in Fear and Hunger, you get to choose what part of the enemy's body you're going to attack. And that's where the genius lies. See, each body part will affect the enemy's ability to fight back or deal damage. Now, if you cut off an enemy's leg, well, guess what? You will actually have an easier time now to reach their head because they're going to be kneeling down. And then you can finish them off. But this leaves you open to damage from their arms, so you kind of have to decide and pick what is the best part to go for. But there's another thing to keep in mind. They can damage you with all their body parts. All of them, including their giant schlongs. And as you may have noticed, I have got this weird filter on. It's a censor mod that I had to install because this game has a crazy amount of explicit themes. So just beware that there's supposed to be stuff there that's kind of blurred out with giant black boxes. But it doesn't end here, by the way, because it's not just the enemy that loses body parts. You lose them too. You can lose your arms, your legs, and one by one, they will do this until they finish you off, which is what the ogre does to us. Just when you think you're dead, you wake up and you're bleeding from all kinds of places, even from where the sun don't shine. He did stuff to our character, that's all I'm gonna say, okay? I'm not gonna go too deep into it. Point is, this is how you start Fear and Hunger. Instantly shoved to the ground and pounded, quite literally. Dying is a massive part of the experience. Failing is a part of the experience, and getting bum rushed is somehow also included in that. Unlike games such as, let's say, Dark Souls or Smash Brothers of all things, where the difficulty of the game comes from lacking experience or skill to pull off sets of combos or recognizing boss pathing, Fear and Hunger is a hard game only because of your lack of knowledge and luck. And I mean a lot of fucking luck. You see, the amount of trial and error throughout my first few playthroughs was insane. There are several times where I just wanted to pull my hair out at how frustrating it would get, but I couldn't stop. I wanted to keep playing. There was just something alluring about having to retry over and over again. So, on our second try around, we enter, and we now know where the guard is located. And most of the time in the game, you can simply avoid enemies, which is the best strategy, as killing enemies doesn't really garner you any sort of experience points, unlike other RPG games. See, progression in Fear and Hunger is non-existent in the traditional sense. Progression in the game instead comes from your own knowledge and experience from each subsequent run that you end up doing. Loitering around, we find a lot of different scriptures. Now, each of these books contains actually valuable information. Some of the books will give you access to crafting items, and some of them will give you a lot of detailed lore about the world of Fear and Hunger. However, checking the bookshelf, we get introduced to gambling, baby! You see, Fear and Hunger includes a coin flip system, and this shit determines half of what happens to you in the game. And I really mean it when I say that. Here's an example. On the same exact floor, we run into an older gentleman. His name is Buckman, a man sent into the dungeon on the search for Legard, alongside a group of warriors from the Kingdom of Rondon.
I don't have time for this. Listen, I've been lost in these dungeons for what feels like a lifetime. Mamma mia. My sense of time has become blurry. It might be years, months, or, I fear, even just weeks. I don't know what business you got here, but if I were you, I'd run out as fast as possible.
After a quick conversation with Buckman, he hides away in a nearby room. Inside of here, we find a bed. And assuming that I'm playing Minecraft in this bitch, I decide to take a nap and sort of use this as a save point, only to be faced by this, the coin flip. I didn't think much of it. Oh, how I would come to regret that quickly. I roll for heads, as my German friend told me to do.
Bro, trust me. Go heads. Always go heads. Always go fucking heads. Never go tails. Heads feels better.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
That single coin flip ended my run.
JK, I've been blessed by the old gods. Sleep well, my sleeping beauty.
Trortur, you filthy animal. Is there no end to your cruelty?
Quiet, you pig. Just be glad I found someone more interesting than you.
You'll quickly learn that the coin flip is your worst enemy. But I love this mechanic. I'm gonna be real, the coin flip is one of the main reasons I kept playing the game. It added like a level of edge that just made me enjoy the journey far more, which might have to do with me being a degenerate CSGO gambler. God, I wasted so much money. Oh yeah, did I mention you can also pick up lucky coins, which allow you to just hold the shift button and get yourself 2 coin flips instead of 1 every time you do it, which is fantastic because your chances go from 50 to about 75%. Ooh, so how about this? Let's flip a coin, and if it's heads, you guys gotta subscribe. God damn it, I can't even win a coin flip like this. Either way, you guys should still subscribe and also join our Discord to be part of the Blue Lad community. So, the fellow that caught us is named Trortur, and well, he just tortures us to death. We can now, with the knowledge of what he's gonna do to us, return and hopefully manage to get the coin flip to save our game. And yes, the beds are the only method of actually saving. This time, we managed to sneak up to one of Trortur's rooms. The game gives us 3 options when we hear him approach. We can either hide and let him pass, like a pussy. This will cause Trortur to just linger around downstairs all the time, which kinda sucks, so we go for the other option. Ambush him. I'll be honest, I was scared. I had already experienced enemy battles at this point, so I kind of knew how weak I really was. But he does not stand much of a chance, and after ending him off, we can kick his body or even try to skin him, which we probably shouldn't do. Trortur is kind of a sad guy. His backstory, just like many others, can be learned by talking to characters in the game or reading books all around the dungeon. In Trortur's case, he was a great warrior, part of the Rondon Empire. And yes, that name is clearly meant to be a pun on London, and all around you'll actually find these flags that resemble the St. George's Cross. Trortur was apparently captured for over 5 years. By the time they saved him, he had turned into a grotesque monster, no longer really resembling himself, and all he wanted to do was to torture others the way he was tortured. But now, he's nothing more than a shish kebab on the ground after taking his life. There is also a side quest you can do with Trortur where you betray Buckman by talking to Trortur during battle, and this can help you get the Penance Armor, a special strong item in the game that is really epic. However, we once more will see a beautiful thing made apparent about this game here. This whole segment perfectly describes how Fear and Hunger works. First time I run into him, I die. So in my subsequent runs, I try to avoid him, and eventually I realize that game ending him is probably the best case because otherwise he'll just be a nuisance throughout my runs. And that is how the game teaches you to become far more cruel, as these dungeons will otherwise just chew you and spit you out. The rest of the floor is empty besides one interesting thing. In one of the rooms there is a cage and inside it a little girl. Now if you play as Cahara, we can simply lockpick the cage and let her out. This allows the girl to join our party. To be honest, the girl's existence is sort of odd and not made very clear in the story until much later, so we can't really figure out her deal just yet. Entering the courtyard, bodies litter the pathway. One of the right side doors is blocked with an inscription. We will come back here later. The next room contains these dark priests that are casually just sacrificing a dude. You can actually make the decision of completing the sacrifice for them, and at first it might just seem like you're being a cruel piece of shit, but it is kind of funny, it does garner you something special. Affinity. You see, each character in Fear and Hunger is able to unlock special skills, but these can only be further enhanced if you unlock that door that we saw in the courtyard much earlier. To do this, we need a purifying talisman, something that drops from one of these wizards or that you can find in the shelf. Inside, we find the Hexen Table. This is the game's special object that allows you to unlock new abilities, with each ability having something valuable for your playthrough. An example is the Blood Portal that allows you to traverse the dungeon through different ritual circles. This makes surviving much easier as you can skip a lot of backtracking that would normally be an issue where enemies might kill you. But how do you do it? Well, that's the interesting part. By committing acts of, well, I was going to say some war crimes, but basically doing things in the name of old gods. There are these beings from which the world is shaped in Fear and Hunger. These eldritch creatures directly inspired by stories from authors like Lovecraft. I'll get into the lore of them a lot more later too, but for now we instead search the area and uncover another monstrosity, the giant human hydra. This thing is great, because no matter if you attack it or simply comply with its demands, which is to give it human flesh, well, there's no benefit to any of it. It's just pointless of a task, just like the toilet on the left side, where it just reeks of blood and human juices, as well as obviously shit, but somehow we have the option of jumping straight down. Only issue is, if we do that, we're stuck forever. And I really mean stuck forever. There's no game over screen. You can just sit there and wait, but that's about it. or press F5 to instantly reset, of course. Besides, of course, the human hydra, the toilet, and, well, obviously the human sacrifice going on, there is one thing that this floor does contain that is useful to us, and that is the ritual circles. We're able to pray here towards 3 different old gods, creatures whose influence still reigns supreme around these parts even though they've been gone for a long time. A large part of the game centers around these old gods, or gods in general, as they're kind of the main reason for the shape of the story of Fear and Hunger. First we have Gorogoroth, the destroyer of man, the god of destruction and human sacrifice. Sylveon, the goddess of love and fertility, whom created men and women at the dawn of time. Finally, Almir, the ascended one and the last of the older gods. Praying to any of them will raise your affinity for that particular god, allowing you to gain special abilities that are all related to them while going to the Hexen table. Not finding much else in this area, we instead use the second floor key that we found on Trortur that we picked up much earlier to unlock a new path inside of his room. Down here, the walls are filled with blood and bodies, reminding me a little bit of the other world in Silent Hill or Nowhere in Signalis. There is a dark secret down here, however. If we interact with any of the walls, this thing will appear.
Who disturbed my sleep? Can't you see I have not retained my whole body yet? You insolentful.
This floating head is Nasrath, a powerful wizard who wanted to be part of the new gods, a set of individuals that ascended to godhood after the old gods disappeared. However, they kind of betrayed him and left him without a body. For now, if we try to fight him, we won't do any damage, and from the distance, he will make this creature appear. This is the darkness. A monster that you are unable to fight back against. No matter how much you do, it will crush you. So, if we go back really quick, instead of touching the walls, we instead ignore them and enter the prison quarters. Here, we can eventually find a giant, large lever. Pulling it, we can hear a noise in the distance. But since we don't really know what to do for now, we instead pick up a creepy doll in one of the prison cells, which we can actually hand to the little girl companion. This makes her seemingly happy. With no clear directions, we instead head upstairs, which leads us to a whole new area. The music and ambiance here changes. And speaking of the music, man, there are some straight up bangers of music in this. Like, the music builds up this perfect tension that is just terrifying. It's almost as if the artist is sitting in my ear whispering sweet nothings. Now, this area does seem similar to the previous ones we've been to, except one difference. There is a big boy monster, giant big boy, just patrolling the place. Avoiding him, we run instead into another sane human, a knight named Sir Seymour. Alongside him is actually Buckman.
Hold it, Seymour. You know this one. This one is one of the good ones.
A funny detail is that if we didn't kill Trortur, then Seymour will actually remain alone here, and eventually he'll be left to die. But because Trortur is dead, Buckman is now able to rejoin his comrade, even being thankful to us for ending Trortur's life. Around us are tables filled with weapons, and just like your average gacha player,
Let's go gambling! Aw, dang it.
We got to gamble, bro. We got to gamble. Of course, I'm out of luck, so the weapons just vanish into thin air. Kind of reminding me a little bit of Dungeons & Dragons or Baldur's Gate 3, where if you don't roll high enough of a dice, whatever decision you want to make will simply be negated as if it never existed to begin with. So, since I put all my stats into essentially evasion at this point, I leave the basement, but lucky me, on the way out, we run into the game's first jump scare. We get sucked into the ground and end up in the flip side, a weird alternate world of our own. If we walk for a while, we will suddenly run into the Black Witch, a fucking terrifying enemy that is easy to avoid as long as you try to get out of this place fast. Otherwise, she might get you, and then you're really in trouble. This part of the basement is also crawling with these gelatinous creatures known as Maniba. Trying to talk to them literally garners you nothing. Finally, having exited the basement, we are back at the front gates. Slowly but surely, you will realize that everything in this place is connected. There is a new face also to be seen here, a merchant of sorts. The guy seems totally trustworthy, so of course I'm going to purchase some potions of healing, only to get ourselves poisoned by it. Let's think about this for a minute. This dude, this guy, could easily have just sold us a dud, a fake potion that didn't do anything. Shit, he could have even filled it with Kool-Aid or something. But no, he went out of his way to intentionally poison us. I love this game. So, with our recently acquired knowledge, we go back inside and pick up something called the mock-up book, and once again go towards Trortur's floor. This time, however, we head the opposite direction and run into Enki. Now, this is one of the other playable characters in the game. He is a bit of a shitheel, so talking to him gains us nothing. The reason Enki is even in the dungeon of Fear and Hunger to begin with is mainly to seek knowledge on how to ascend to godhood himself. See, he worships one of the old gods, Almir, so his purpose here is the least sympathetic one. Instead, we can use the mock-up book on one of the walls here to find a new secret passageway. The other side holds the backyard. Here we run into a third playable character. Oh, the lovely, hunky Ragnvalder, the beast of the land. So, Ragnvalder is able to join our party, but not just yet, though. Speaking of Ragnvalder, this man's reason for entering the dungeon is not much different from ours. He's also on the hunt for Lagarde, but not for money. For him, Lagarde is a target to kill. You see, Ragnvalder's entire village was slaughtered by Lagarde, while on the hunt for an ancient object. This artifact is what led Lagarde out on the journey that would turn the entire kingdom of Rondon against him. So of course, Ragnvalder is here to enact his revenge. Ignoring him for now, we pray at the altar nearby. We can also talk to a butterfly man, a strange, lanky-looking creature that kind of reminds me of Pyrocynical if he wasn't a degenerate. We also find a dagger laying around, which reminds Cahara of his childhood when his dad taught him how to use one, but since it's useless for us, we are offered to give it to the little girl. If we give it to her, she now actually has a way to attack enemies as well, and will do more than just 0 damage, which is really useful. The other end of the backyard has these bunny meadows, and yeah, this is gonna be heavily censored because holy shit, all of them are doing the devil's tango. Here we have an offer. We can join in on the bunny party and commit some birds and beast type shit, which will heal us, but there is an important thing to note. The bunny man tells us that this one is free. Meaning that the next time, we will have to pay in some form or shape. And you already know, I tried to test it out right away. If we flip a coin the second time and lose, our character will actually lose their sanity and get stuck for eternity humping a bunch of rabbit people. But if everything goes smoothly, our entire party just gets healed and our affinity towards Sylvan, the old god, will just increase. With not much left to do, we instead decide to head back to the bloody pathway, which is a smart choice. It seems the lever we pulled earlier caused a giant lift of sorts to appear that wasn't here before. Even one time I actually tried jumping down the hole without the lift, which just broke all my bones and got me killed. Using the lift, it will help us descend into the darkness, only to find ourselves exploring the mines. All around here, there are these little cave gnomes that fly around, and these shits can be annoying if you aren't careful, as they will overwhelm you. We do run across a few interesting people and creatures down here. One of these is Pocket Cats, by far one of the coolest characters in the entire game, but also another weirdo.
I hope you don't mind if I ask this straight. There are children of light, those destined to walk under the bright sun. Those people do well in all hardships of life. They have dear humans who they want to return to. Even in the darkest hour, they can feel warmth of their loved ones in their heart and gain extra courage from that. Then in the opposite end of the spectrum, there are people of darkness. Those humans are often driven to depression and sorrow because of life's peculiar ways. So, humans of light and darkness, which one are you?
So after that wisdom from Pocket Cat, which definitely doesn't sound extremely pessimistic and dreary, kind of like a depressed little Garfield of himself. But either way, answering all of his questions, he will eventually offer you a deal. If you bring him a child, he will give you an item in return. And when I say offers you a deal, I really do not know if it's the right way to call this. The items that he offers are ones that you can actually find, but you just don't get them right away in your journey. They're kind of difficult to achieve. But nonetheless, if you are a scumbag, you'll give him the girl away for a shiny new weapon, or a grimoire containing all the secrets of the Fear and Hunger. Ah, shit, I won't even be able to use this thing if I lose my arms. Might as well get that little shit back. See, Pocket Cat is a servant of the trickster god, the Moon. His reason for wanting children in exchange for powerful weapons could be as a way to keep sacrificial offerings away from the other gods and only for his own god. So, alrighty, well, just like a decent human, I don't offer the girl away, and instead we cross a bridge, running into Moonless. This is a wolf-like monster that roams the dungeons, and I love this little doggy because it's fantastic. Basically, you can kill Moonless, which means you're a horrible person, or you can talk to her. And every enemy in the game can actually be spoken to, which is sometimes something good you can do and it garners some great results, but most of the time, it just wastes one of your turns. In the case of Moonless though, we're able to offer it some of the rotten meat that we picked up earlier. Doing this twice causes Moonless to actually like us and even offers to join our party. With Moonless on our side, we have a monster that easily does damage each turn for us because it actually gets a double attack, which is great, but that's not even the start of it. See, the big problem that starts becoming apparent right now is that we've got too many mouths to feed. Each character actually has 3 gauges that we need to keep track of. One is the obvious health. Then there is sanity, which we can heal by smoking some opium like Jack Sparrow, or by drinking it away like my uncle at every reunion. But I love that they decided that the vices are the only way to keep your sanity in check, as reality is so bleak that we need to dosage our stress and fear and pain away. Finally, the last gauge we have is hunger. This is the easiest to satiate, as you just gotta make sure you pick up a lot of food along the way, but if you don't, your legs will stop to work over time, as you lack nutrition. So this is kind of where the balancing in how many members you decide to bring with you comes in, because keep in mind, every member can die at any point, so you gotta weigh your options carefully. Also, I love that Moonless in particular will just randomly pee all over the place as you explore. And as much as I love this from a joke perspective, it's actually a gameplay mechanic. You see, each time Moonless takes a leak on a corpse or something, it will work like a level up for the little doggy and will increase the damage that Moonless outputs, but also just increase all of his stats across the board. Exploring the rest of the mines, we can find small objects, but a noise can be heard in the distance. Suddenly, she will appear. The Cave Mother. Similar to the little cave dwellers that we have seen roaming around here, she is the first boss battle that I ran into. So, if we focus all our damage towards her wings, she will eventually fly away. This, however, only stage 1 of her battle, and we'll need to fight her on a second time, but this time over on a different bridge. There is no benefit to actually killing her, so we can easily just avoid this battle if we don't pick up objects lying around this particular area. Instead, we can delve deeper, as this place is ancient feeling, and in the corner of our eye, we can run into a strange man as we enter the mines. If we confront him, he talks back to us in a friendly tone, eventually moving on and leaving us behind. So we also move on further, and one of the monsters that lurks here is the Yellow Mage. These guys are the only enemy type that will attack you and damage you outside of regular battles. They'll actually hit you in the overworld, so it's best to kill them right away. But the Yellow Mages do carry some interesting lore around them. They are connected to the little floating head from much earlier in our journey, so we'll talk about them a little bit later again. Following the paths of the dungeon, it leads us to the Cave Dwellers' village. One of them here is actually assaulting none else than Darce, so if we step in and kill the Cave Dweller, Darce will be very grateful and willing to even join our party. But if we don't help out, then the Cave Dwellers will just be nice to us. However, with Darce on our side, we can explore deeper and further, only to discover that the entire place is lived in by the Cave Dwellers, a society that has sprung up in the depths of the dungeon. Perhaps these people, at one point, were regular humans just like us, but the corruption of the dungeon destroyed any regular facets of humanity that they held, but kept their touch of society and community still intact though. Checking each building, there is one where 2 cave dwellers are humping each other while their kid is just hiding upstairs and traumatized by it. I'm just gonna leave it at that. The dungeon holds very few things here though, but the one thing we do find ourselves is a random hexagon-shaped cube. We don't know what to even do with it for now, so we just leave it in our backpack. The end of the same hallway also contains a giant hole. We can not enter this place yet, but it almost looks like a big old fish mouth from the outside. In the other direction, another giant hole can be seen, but before I casually jump down into it and get myself killed, I instead make sure to search for a rope that I can use to lower myself down. Doing this, we reach level 6 of the mines. This place contains some very weird looking people. These are the wolf masks, and unlike the bunny masks that worship Sylveon, these fellas worship Grogeroth instead. So all they do here is a bit of devil's tango, as well as kind of casually consuming their friends. So, you know what, we're gonna do this one time to restore our hunger, because that's what it does if you actually interact with them, and it's best to keep it just to a one-time occurrence. The thing with the lower levels of the mines is that they're littered with enemies, but the biggest enemy you can have is honestly yourself. Walking up towards one of the broken down walls, I get prompted to use an explosive vial, something which can either be crafted by picking up black sludge from the top floor and mixing it with nitroglycerin, or just simply picking up the object when you find it. Either way, doing this and blowing up the actual wall just blows up the entire mine. Not realizing this, I would end up getting stuck and slowly passing away underneath a bunch of rubble. So if we instead don't do that and walk around and explore further, we'll instead uncover some interesting things here, like the Eastern Sword, a weapon which can be picked up and added to our inventory if we want to, but pulling it out will cause a cave-in to happen somewhere else, as well as causing a Assassin Spectre, which is just kind of a ghost, to start hunting us. So it's best to leave the sword behind for now. We'll also find a kind of small room containing alchemical vials and biological instruments. This could be belonging to that shady figure we ran across while entering the mines. So, with our only pathway in the mines being blocked off, we have no way of accessing the catacombs. But fear not, there is still one pathway that we have yet to check. So if we head back upstairs and take that explosive vial with us towards the backyard, we can uncover a small space where we can throw the explosive vial and blow up the wall at. Doing this will grant us access to the Thicket, which is a large tree with roots that go deep and far beneath the earth. But before we do that, we run into another enemy type. This time again, it's the hounds. They're always super loud, but if we try to talk to the hounds and throw a stick at them, they'll be too distracted, which allows us to defeat them much easier. Entering the door and falling the roots down, the walls become thicker and thicker as we go. The bottom contains otherworldly monsters and infectious flowers that will try to gnaw at your brain. You might notice that the thicket is, well, thick as the name implies. There's so many vines everywhere and it's kind of hard to get around, and our only way to go is down. Quite literally, as we need to fall through holes to actually progress. And one of the rooms even holds an ancient katana blade, which we can pick up and add into our inventory, but it will again cause another specter assassin to spawn, which we need to defeat first. Killing it, if we have these special, like, specter swords, will allow us to get away from the fella without too much trouble. The only other enemy type that we can run across down here is the Maulers, who are humanoid creatures that shoot out poison from their big fat heads. They also clearly look like schlongs as well, if you haven't noticed. The only other thing that's interesting about the Thicket has got to be Ragnvalder. See, he's actually waiting here, and at this point, he's just gotten lost inside of the Thicket and doesn't know how to get out. And if we offer, with a non-full party, for him to join us, he will. But if our party's full, he'll just be left behind. But don't worry, throughout my many playthroughs, I did come get this fella several times. Eventually, we'll fall through the actual Thicket and enter the catacombs. Searching around at the bottom here, we can find him. Le'garde. Finally, after all that we have done, we can finally see him, and he is, dead. Yeah. The guy we came for is already dead, but oh no, it's worse than that. He isn't dead because of some sort of static event. He is dead because we were quite literally too slow to reach him. I'm not even kidding. You have a grand total of 30 minutes to get to Le'garde before he dies. Meaning that if you don't get the pin perfect start to your run, you won't even stand a chance of reaching him. It's funny because at no point does the game tell you this, and if you don't look it up online, you won't even know that you can keep him alive. You just assume the guy is always dead. However, if you find him alongside Darce while he's still alive, she will just simp over his body and cry. With that sorted and his body found, we can leave the dungeon or restart our run and try to get there much quicker so that we can actually save him, which is possible within those first 30 minutes. Here we can either bring him along into our party, but if it's full, he can't join, so we're gonna have to sacrifice someone on the nearby ritual circle, which might be a good time to talk a little bit about the actual ritual circles. See, there are a few things you could do here. One is obviously to pray to the old gods, but another one that I haven't really paid much attention to is the marriage system. You see, if your characters are way too damaged and injured and maybe have lost an arm or two, you can merge two of your characters into a single being known as the marriage, which is a bizarre creature that consists of two humans quite literally merging into each other and fusing together. Even the name of it being marriage relates to how humans, once we actually get married, we merge our lives into one another. I mean, you got to think about it, right? When a marriage happens, everything, your finances, your world, your literal perception of the world merges into one. So it is kind of an interesting way of doing things, but it is also kind of grotesque. We can also sacrifice our teammates. So doing this, we can sacrifice someone and then bring Le'garde with us. And if Ragnvalder is in our party, he will actually hold back his anger and he won't go after Le'garde right away. And also seems like Le'garde has some amnesia.
I seem to have amnesia.
It's not necessarily an amnesia per se. It could be possible for your mind to block recent traumatizing events.
Saving him and bringing him upstairs towards the exit, it feels like our journey is finally over. Or is it? It seems he came here for a purpose, and he doesn't plan on leaving. He needs to do something down here. So by the runtime of the video, you might have realized that saving Le'garde isn't exactly the end of the game. It's only halfway point of our journey. If we make the decision to leave Le'garde behind, we can actually get one of the game's endings called Ending E. This is just you escaping from the dungeon, and it's the simplest one to get. Whether Le'garde is dead or alive, it doesn't matter. You can just leave at the same place you entered. But that's not what our journey ends. So, let's take a moment to talk a bit about Le'garde. This asshole is a real piece of shit, having been clearly based on the character of Griffith from the Berserk manga. A knight leading a band of knights that are, at first, fighting for a kingdom as mercenaries until all of a sudden, the kingdom turns against the band of brothers because Griffith decides that, F it, it's time for me to ascend to godhood. And guess what? Same thing here. Legarde is prophesied to be the one to unify humanity into a new era, and he has had a band of brothers and sisters that fight for him in a knighthood, that being the Knights of the Midnight Suns. He eventually betrays the kingdom of Rondon, though, and starts murdering innocent people, similar to what Griffith does. This is what leads Legarde all the way to the north on the search for a mysterious cube of the depths, which essentially causes him to slaughter an entire clan of people, that being the same clan which Ragnvalder belongs to. So, we know we gotta go back into the dungeon, but entering it once more, something is different. An ominous presence has entered the room. Suddenly, the air grows colder. No longer am I a happy little Pepe ready to die by stepping on a nail and getting blood poisoning. No, this feels different. It's almost suffocating. We lay our eyes upon him. This creature, whatever it is, whatever it wants, we can't let it catch us, because if we do, it's over. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Mauler, an enemy that will hunt you, always appearing at exits to areas you enter, similar to Mr. X from Resident Evil in that sense, right? Where the fella will burst out of walls wherever you least expect him. But the connections don't end there. The design of Mauler, which I must add is my favorite in the entire game, is obviously inspired by Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2. There's actually a funny little thing in the game which I didn't point out earlier, but if you actually go around, you can find these like prison bars where if you look through them, you will actually see Mauler standing on the other side. This is directly taken from Silent Hill 2, where early on in the game, you will actually run into Pyramid Head in a similar way. Of course, Pyramid Head, unlike Mr. X though, doesn't really hunt you around, but instead sort of appears as a boss battle throughout the game, like multiple times. Something about how simple yet terrifying Mauler is though, just stands out far more to me. What makes him so scary isn't the way he looks, but instead how insane his strength is. Killing him is close to impossible at first. He has so many hits on top of special coin flip attacks that do incredible damage, like even one of them, called Peck, would literally just rip your head off in one hit. Up until now, we've been able to comfortably traverse from one level to another after learning the layout of the map, but Mauler kind of twists that on its head. If we don't carefully run past him, our entire run can just be destroyed instantly. And this is what makes the survival in the game much more intense than other horror games that I've actually played. The constant variables of random items, random luck, and now add to that an enemy that teleports around and pesters you all across the entire map makes this by far the best survival horror game I've ever played. So Mauler as an enemy can't be stopped easily, so we need to kind of figure out a strategy. Speaking of which, Mauler can be encountered early on in the game. If you guys remember, there was a bed back in the basement floor where we met Sir Seymour. Inside is a statue resembling a woman holding crows. If we fail our coin flip here, then Mauler will actually appear early on in the game already in a battle that we can't run away from. His backstory is also kind of depressing as well. Before he became solely known as the Mauler, he was once a man named Rudimir from the Kingdom of Rondon, holding the rank of captain in its armies. However, he eventually took command of the infamous and, well, clearly very grim dungeon of Fear and Hunger, and his letters are what actually we use to figure out this lore, because he seems to be the one who actually wrote the letters inside of the dungeon. But back in 1590, the ancient madness from the catacombs beneath the dungeon began to sort of spread up. Some even believe that the ongoing plague in Rondon stemmed from these cursed depths, and eventually, determined, Captain Rudimir, which is Mauler, set out to cleanse the dungeons, unaware of the impossible task he had ahead of himself. As supplies started to dwindle, he traded the Cube of the Depths, which I guess he must have got from none else than the man himself, Legarde, to the Cavedwellers for resources. But the darkness eventually overtook him, driving him mad. So clad in only a cloth and haunted by feverish visions of crows, he now became one himself, roaming the halls and purging them of life. So, Captain Rudimir was no more. Honestly, Mauler is by far my favorite character in the game, an honorable captain that unfortunately succumbed to the darkness seeping out of the dungeon, even though he originally went in to try to actually cleanse the place, only to be cursed now to roam its halls forever. Avoiding him for now, we also run into a new face in the dungeon, Isaiah. He is a bit of a distant man, but observing his body language, we can tell that he's quite familiar with these dungeons. And he has some ancient maps that he wants to sell to us for 50 silver. However, we're gonna simply decline that for now. Alright, well, it's about time we figure out what to do about Mauler. You see, along the way, we have picked up objects like bear traps and throwing darts, which we can easily use to take down regular enemies like the guards by snapping off their fat legs, but we cannot really use these against Mauler. Our best course is to aim for his head, because that's where we'll do the most damage, even though it is the hardest place to actually hit. Using something called the Red Vial will actually blind him and not allow him to hit us with his peck attack, which is incredibly powerful and instantly chops off our head. If we then also pray to whatever gods have cursed us to enter this dungeon, we might stand a chance to beat him. Eventually, luck will be on our side and Mauler's tyranny can finally end when we kill him. Searching his body, we find a key. You might not know where this key goes, but I do. You see, in several playthroughs, I've run across a room which I couldn't access even when I tried to lockpick it. A place on the first floor that had an ominous aura emanating from it. Well, it's about time we entered it. You hear ominous voices in your head.
You miserable morsel worm. You wish to use me?
Inside, we find Miasma, a special sword which we could have received from Pocket Cat by sacrificing the girl, but in this case we can avoid that and get the sword this way instead. There is, however, some details that I wasn't really aware of about Miasma. You see, the sword is alive. It has a life force of its own, and it will try to poison your mind as it sees you as unworthy. It's actually a cool backstory, as miasma refers to an unpleasant or unhealthy smell or vapor, and back in the Middle Ages, during the Black Death, it was thought that miasma was the cause of the many diseases that caused so many deaths. And the same goes for us. If our sanity actually falls under 50, we will lose our control and slaughter our entire party. So for now, we gotta make sure to keep track of our gauges even more and just chug down a lot of alcohol. I'm gonna be real with you. So, with the power of this sword in our hands and the quest to find Lagarde finished, we have one more thing to do. So, you might recall that we ran into a big floating head that simply decided to kill us early on in the game. That was Nashra. Now, we can actually make him join us. To do this, all we gotta make sure to do is find a special item from one of the yellow mages back in the mines. If we talk to one of the yellow mages, instead of killing them, and answer the correct questions about the god they worship, that being Grogoroth, they will give us a talisman. And if we wear this talisman while meeting Nashra, he will eventually let us live after we talk to him in battle. Doing this, the floating and honestly quite vulgar little head, he's kind of annoying, will join our party, and oh boy, he is useful. See, Nasra doesn't actually have to be fed. He doesn't need food. But another thing is, he has access to a lot of really powerful spells, so he is incredibly useful to have on our side. Next, the only thing we have left to do in the dungeon is take on some of the more rare bosses. One of these is Iron Shakespeare, which is a giant armor that walks around the basement level, and to be honest, you don't really need to even battle it. It's only really useful if you want to get a thing called the Quill when you're doing a special run, but for the most part, we can ignore it. The other thing that we can find is down in the mines, and it's this massive monstrosity known as Salmon Snake. Usually I'd recommend just running away, but killing this fucker will give us something amazing. You see, we have been collecting souls from killing enemies, and these souls are what we use to get different abilities on the Hexen table. But the souls of the boss battles are far more special. In the case of Salmon Snake, this asshole will give us the ability to prevent limb loss and bleeding, as well as removing effects of infections. So that means that whenever we actually apply this effect to any of our characters, none of them will lose any of their arms, which is great. And there it is. I don't know if you're noticing it, but the fear is starting to lessen. I'm no longer afraid of the dungeon. I'm starting to yearn for it. I want to be here. I feel at home in this musky and decrepit place. As much as I've been struggling, I'm starting to love this experience, and this is kind of what made me want to make a video on this. Even early on when I kept being punished, something just made me want to keep trying and trying again. And that's what makes it so much fun. You see, the dungeons of Feared Hunger are interesting. Since the maps shift and randomize, you can sort of learn the directions you need to go in, but by the mere fact that any item is based on RNG chance and you don't always have access to it, means that each run you do will be drastically different, to such an extreme that I often caught myself in disbelief at the amount of things that went wrong for me. And the mere fact that I had to spend hours upon hours in the game already and only uncover the most surface level knowledge was honestly almost cathartic. Shit, even as I'm editing this video right now, I feel like there's so many things I've yet to uncover or even include in the script. Which leads me to the ancient city of Mahabre. Down in the catacombs, if we bring the Cube of the Depths with us, we can actually use it to access the second half of Feared Hunger. This is the Old City, and here the second half of our journey will begin. And oh boy, if you thought any of the previous shit was hard, just wait for this. So, first thing that happens to me is that I get poisoned, and this dude with 4 arms, which I'm sure he doesn't use for anything else, wink wink, but god did I really want to enter this place. I just wanted to know its secrets. See, Mahabre is a city of gods, currently ruled by a group of individuals called the New Gods, that basically decided to attain godhood after the world of the living was abandoned by the Old Gods. It's a lot of gods. But either way, these fellas have a new enemy at their doorstep, that being Lagarde, and you see this man really wants to ascend to godhood himself, as he believes in a prophecy about himself being the bringer of a new world. But instead, we get stuck in Mahabre dealing with a shit ton of new and goofy enemies. And honestly, the city of Mahabre is just so crazy because it functions in such a different way than the dungeon we've been exploring so far. See, there are 2 versions of the city to explore. One is past Mahabre, a bright and more colorful version, and of course, present Mahabre, just as dreary as the dungeon was. We can travel between these 2 by using beacons that are found all over the place. And man, I will be honest, there is a lot of backtracking that you need to do here. Transported to the past Mahabre, the first enemy we run into is Uterus, and you can kind of figure out on your own what it's meant to be without me going into grueling detail about this thing. I mean, it literally plops out a golden creature crawling towards us. Ew, icky, get away. Finding a giant tower, we climb it. Inside, we can take a quick rest, but doing this will cause us to experience a nightmare, one belonging to Cahara. Awakening, we find ourselves in a nightmare. We're apparently in Rondon, the capital of the kingdom, and we're playing as Cahara as per usual. Walking around, we can uncover a few little details. The first one is a bunch of notes on the wall. They mention 13 children going missing, making me wonder if this potentially could be related to Pocket Cats, because we do know his affinity for that. And if we actually go down into a cellar a little bit later in the city, we can actually see a child trying to crawl towards us before being yoinked. And yeah, we're just not going to deal with that. Checking into one of the other buildings as well, it's a brothel. Inside, people are just doing the humpa, but we can also run into a memory of Cahara talking to what seems to be his wife. She is kind of in the business of being a, let's call it an OnlyFans model for the sake of brevity, but basically he wants to get her out of that business. But to do that, he needs to make a bunch of silver. So that's why he went down into the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger. But it doesn't end there. On the table, we can even find some romance novels. It seems that the woman he loves is genuinely involved with him and loves him back too. So we know what the deal is with that. Heading north, we run into none else than Enki. It seems he wants to sacrifice himself, which is all good with me. I don't really care about him as a character, not gonna lie, but he is trying to pray towards Almir, not really enjoying his human real-life existence, but eventually an epiphany hits him and he decides to head to the Fear and Hunger dungeon. Lastly, we see memories of Ragnvalder's promise to kill Lagarde after losing the members of his clan. But man, this one scene, it just hits you. Ragnvalder and his people didn't ask for this, but Lagarde's hunt for power led him to commit heinous acts. The cube was something Ragnvalder's people found while exploring the haunted world of Vinland. And seeing Ragnvalder just sitting on the ground after losing his woman and child and entire family is just heartbreaking. Once we enter his home, we find something that's honestly beyond bizarre. We encounter an old lady. She slowly looks at us and forces us into a fight. And I warn you, shit gets weird. At first, she doesn't do much, simply stares at us with a dark, gloomy look before she reveals her true form. Skinny Granny. Oh boy, this is a major boss fight in Fear and Hunger 1, and holy shit is it difficult. The Skinny Granny is a myth that's apparently been passed around in the northern parts of the world in Fear and Hunger, and is said to be a creature that lives in the dreams of the people of the north, and she's most likely birthed into existence by Ragnvalder's pain and sorrow. But oh boy, is this fight insane. This bitch has so many limbs, it took forever to defeat her, and she can do a lot of damage. We watched Darce's memories of speaking to Lagarde about the prophecy. Again, we can just tell that Lagarde has a bit of an ego and narcissistic personality, claiming that the cube he plans to steal is something belonging to him, even though it's clearly not his, but I digress. In a white void, we stand, with a new goddess appearing in front of us. Her name is Nilvan, and she's got her boobas just swinging around. She asks us for our help. She wants us to bring her child, perhaps the little girl we found upstairs, and take her child to the Heart of Darkness. We learn later this is the deepest part of the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger, which we've yet to explore. She also rewards us with the Endless Soul, which will now grant us keys, or really that is the key, to the Golden Temple that's at the center of Mahabre, and basically the castle. Leaving the nightmare, we're back in the real world, which I think is a good time for me to bring up the crazy amount of items in this game. I didn't even know for my entire playthrough, but if you just happen to get very lucky early on, you can pick up something called an empty scroll. If you type in a specific sentence into this empty scroll, you can give yourself any item in the game, almost, and any spell without actually having to learn them through affinity with the gods. So I gave myself the ability called Face Step, which lets you teleport several steps forward at any time. This actually helps in case of speedruns, as you can skip a lot of segments, but it does come at the cost of your sanity, so you gotta make sure you have a lot of alcohol on you before you do it. I'm gonna be saving this specific item for later because it's just another one of those aspects of the game that you will quickly get used to once you figure it out. Even if you play this shit for 100 hours or more, you always will tell there are more things and new things you can learn. And again, I'll touch on this subject a bit more at the end of the video. For now, we send ourselves back to the present Mahabre city and run into a freaking monstrosity. The Scarab, a human-faced creature with wrangled arms and legs sticking out from it. Trying to talk to him yields no results, so stabby stabby is our only way. Another enemy we run into is the Lord of Flies, a fitting name given the look of this thing. Also, is it just me, or does his face kind of look like Gordon Ramsay?
Where's the lamb?
The Lord of Flies is kind of a unique battle, actually. The creature was created by the god known as Faltiel. It's a bit of a rare enemy which has a chance of dropping a very particular item called Small Seeds. Now, if you take these seeds all the way back down to the Cavedweller's home in the mines, you can actually plant them as a way to farm food for yourself. The food is dog shit though and does not restore much hunger, but just a bit of a neat and random detail. There's even a farming simulator in this game, which is just crazy. Exploring the deeper parts of Mahabre, this thing peeks at us from within the wall. It is terrifying. I don't have a clue what it is, but it's one of the most horrifying moments in this game. I don't even know what I just saw. I'd soon figure out what it was. My secret admirer could be found outside. It's the Harvest Man. And what the actual fuck is this thing? A giant creature with multiple arms, and its name is a direct reference to a type of spider referred to by the same moniker. But dear lord, that face, and oh, don't even get me started on what happens if this thing catches you lacking. But if you coin flip against it and lose, the Harvest Man will hug you very tight. He will then proceed to do unspeakable shit to you. Originally, my thoughts was that the game had a straightforward point A to point B sort of gameplay, where a standard ending exists that you can just reach easily, but no. The endings all have somewhat either convoluted ways to be achieved or extremely easy ways to be achieved, and so that leads me to my point of even being in Mahabre. The ending I was trying to get was specifically one which was related to Legard, where we had to keep him alive, while exploring Mahabre and defeating all the new gods. So, what we gotta do is find those new gods and actually take them out. We've already received one of their souls that we needed, and that was the one we got from Nilvan, but we still need 2 more, and where do we find them? Well, we start with none else than the Tormented One. He is sort of in the western part of the city, inside of his temple. To actually get him to appear though, we need to go down into a jump-off point where we can essentially go and create a husk of ourselves by using some of the weird liquids and as well as our blood. The husk will just follow us and be a empty, soulless creature that doesn't have anything inside of it. It's literally just a husk. If we take it upstairs to the temple itself and walk all the way to the back, by trying to avoid all the annoying spiders, I'll tell you right now, the spiders can end your run so easily, but this temple is mostly empty, and outside you will have probably noticed there's a lot of, I guess, really grotesque human sacrifices going on and skinning, and it'll make sense soon. If we put the husk onto the thing here, this device, we can essentially try to finish the puzzle. And the puzzle is just ripping apart the poor husk, which is kind of grotesque, but while we're doing this, the Tormented One will actually appear. We can either fight him, which is kind of pointless because you gain nothing from it and you're gonna have to fight him again in a moment, so it's just a waste of health and, you know, potions and stuff. So avoiding him by juking him around the corners is the best case scenario, and then ripping apart the husk. Doing this, the blood will flow to the bottom and fill up a giant pool. If we go there, we can actually battle the Tormented One. Now, he is kind of strange. In a weird way, he doesn't seem super threatening. In the battle, it's best to aim for his arms in the beginning until phase 2, and this is where it gets a little bit more difficult. We gotta aim for the most furthest out rings of his, and if we destroy those, it allows us to hit the middle. Hitting the middle will eventually defeat him. But even after winning against the Tormented One, our character actually points out that in some way, you feel bad for him. Almost like he didn't want to do this. And given his name being the Tormented One, it seems like he genuinely was in a lot of pain, so perhaps we took his misery away. I thought, perfect, we defeated one of the bosses, we got his soul, we can now leave. Except no, when we exit the temple and start walking around, we'll run into something that you guys may have noticed on the walls earlier. So there was actually a guy hanging on the wall, and now he's walking around, and he wants to kill us. This is the White Angel. These things are terrifying, and they will just teleport around the map to catch you. Like, it's almost impossible to avoid them unless you genuinely just have to take them on in a battle and defeat them. So that's what we have to do, but it does cost us a few arms and legs, to be frankly honest with you. The next god that's waiting for us to be defeated is going to be Valtiel. Now, Valtiel is the Enlightened One, and he's actually the one that took away Nasrath. Like, he took his position away and replaced him, which is why he kind of hates him a lot. So if we go there into the Great Library of Mahabre, we will eventually go to a puzzle. Here we just got to organize a bunch of the Uterus characters into the right order. Doing this will open a secret passageway. We'll just watch as Valtiel just yeets himself off of a ledge, but if we go all the way to the bottom, we can fight him. And I'm going to be honest, his boss battle is actually kind of cool. Basically, you can talk to him, but if you talk to him, he's just going to flood you with a bunch of knowledge in your mind. And when he does this, you have a bit of a quiz to do. It'll just be questions about the general lore of Fear and Hunger, and if you don't know these you will actually kind of lose out here on free damage. So just look up the questions, which is what I did. So answering the questions, you will do extra damage, and aiming for the left side of his brain is actually really the smartest thing to do, or left side from our perspective, but his right side of the brain, because that's the part of his brain that actually does the heavy damage and all the psychic type and magic type of spells, which also makes sense because that's the part of the real human brain that does all of the less logical but more creative things. So creativity, magic spells, you get the point. Whereas the left side is the more logical and calculated side of your mind. And the same way, that side of his brain is the one that just does physical damage and doesn't do anything more. So it's best to aim for that one until his third eye shows up, and then we just pop that eye and we defeat him. And in a weird way, as we defeat him, it's not really, again, a happy moment. Even Valtiel's body and our own character screams out in this sense of, we just lost a lot of knowledge. A lot of the world's knowledge disappeared with the death of Valtiel, and honestly, it's not really the most cumbersome of moments. Alright, 3 of the gods have been defeated, so what is next? Well, we gotta now head back towards the tunnels. And what am I talking about? Well, when we entered the Mahabre city, we essentially went through a little bit of a labyrinth full of a lot of zombies and poisonous arrows being shot our way. If we go here and go to the past version of Mahabre, we can solve a puzzle where we just gotta push around a bunch of blocks. Doing this will eventually grant us access to a secret passage. If we go through this passageway, we will uncover the body of Almir, one of the old gods. His body will just be there, and luckily with the sensor mod, you don't have to see his giant schlong just flipping around. I really mean it, it's just there. If we go through these different rooms and search around some of the passageways, we will eventually find a strange green hue. If we interact with it, well, the Lady of the Moon will show up. This is one of the people, or things, creatures, whatever you really want to call it, that actually worships the moon god. And the moon god in particular doesn't really like humans, or at least doesn't think humans should be able to ascend to the level of gods. So we can actually interact with her, and if we try to attack her, she will just die and she will not fight back. But we can do some actual gameplay elements here, where if we do interact with her, she will give us something in return. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be going into that right now. Instead, we're going to be traveling to the present version of Mahabre and going back to this exact same location, because we will find a chest, and inside of that chest will be a key. This key is necessary if we go back to the tower where we went into the nightmare. Right next to it, there is a passageway. Entering here, we'll find something interesting. All around are cages, and even in one corner, there is a blue demon that's seemingly been taken out. We even scoop up some blue demon dust alongside with us. I don't know if it's supposed to be some sort of euphemism for something, but it is what it is.
Someone cooked here.
If we continue down south and then go quickly towards the east, we'll run into the Old Guardian. This fella actually hangs out in the present version of Mahabre in the middle of the square, kind of overseeing the city, but it seems he's waiting for someone, but whoever he's waiting for is not coming back. And I would assume that's the King of Mahabre who's gone missing. It's something that he already told us when we spoke to him previously. The battle against him is not that difficult. Defeating him, we can pick up his red scarf. This is proof that we've defeated him in combat, which we'll definitely need. The final battle is against the nameless figure, the one that's been blocking the path to the Golden Temple all along, and this fella, he's not that difficult. I mean, to be fair with you guys, we've been dealing with way harder shit up until this point, so this guy didn't really do much. Entering the temple, we run into Francois, and he looks like he has seen better days. He seems to be looking after some dogs in the kennel, but when we talk to him, the man seems defeated. He even tells us that, hey, if you want to complete this, if you want total domination, which is impossible to even achieve, go back in time and fight the young me. He actually, if we talk to him, even gives us tips on how to defeat his ass. He just says he's a cocky piece of shit, so it's the best way to take him down. Entering the temple in the present Mahabre, it looks far more majestic, like it was in its heyday, back at the peak of the power of the new gods. Going through it, there's just a lot of fire and flames all around until we find Francois, almost looking bored in his chair, as if we're just a small fly in his eyes. But it's time to finally battle him. Fight me, bitch!
We will see about that. Fight me, you mortal scum.
So, battling Francois is actually relatively easy and straightforward. First of all, aiming for his head is just a no-no. He has way too much health there, and instead, what you should do is insult him. I'm not even lying. Genuinely insult the guy, telling that he's merely a puppet and that he doesn't understand anything. Just because his ego is the size of Mount Everest, he's going to be pissed off, and that's going to cause damage to him, literally to his ego, and physically make sure that he's damaged too. So, once you've done this a few times and cut away his limbs, he will turn into his golden form in this second phase. The way they show this is that literally a bunch of gold burns onto his skin and body, turning him to solid gold forms, which is kind of interesting because if you walk around the Golden Temple, it's all related to gold. There's fire and flames, and that's exactly what happens to him. Just a cool little detail in the design here, but it doesn't end there. After insulting him and getting him to that second phase, we can keep insulting him over and over again until he falls. And there it is. Our option now is to either leave and try to get a different ending, or we try to sit on the throne. Now, Legard shows his true hand. As he goes up, he actually reveals that the amnesia was all bullshit, if it wasn't obvious already, and he's about to sit on the throne himself. We then decide to step on the chair after Legard disappears. Sitting in it, we show up in the void. This is another plane of existence, a place beyond regular. And guess what? We don't have our party members. Looking around, we can run into them, like Mauler, sitting close to a flame. Talking to him, it seems like he's been here for a long time, implying that time is a bit twisted in the void. And to be honest with you, most of this place is devoid of any life, and yes, pun intended. Point is, there are creatures here, monsters from long past times that we would prefer to not interact with. Like, for example, the Brugrader Blight. This thing is really difficult. It's a giant dinosaur, and essentially what it is what the former, I guess, society consisted of, which was lizard men, and now they evolved into these weird dinosaur-looking monsters. Our options down here are either we're going to fight the Yellow King, that being specifically Legard. He's now become this weird entity of sorts, which is kind of interesting because the Yellow King is actually a story or a book that was written of different short stories with horror and romance sort of mixed together, written really a long time ago. But it was an inspiration to none else than Lovecraft. Lovecraft's book took inspiration from the King in Yellow. In a weird way, I guess we do get a little bit of that here too. This sort of eldritch horror, this Lovecraftian and old god form of storytelling where all the characters that we encounter seem to want to attain some sort of godhood. Either way, when it comes to Legard, we can either defeat him as the Yellow King, and, well, this will just give us one of the endings, or option 2 is we can kneel to him, and this will give us another one of the endings of the game. But that pretty much concludes that. So before we continue, there is still one subject to talk about. There is still the subject of the lore in this game. We have dived a tiny bit into it throughout this video, but I sort of want to explain it a tad more clearly. There's a special place in the city of Mahabre that stands out to me. It's an altar found in the past version of the city, where if you pray at the altar itself, the new gods will talk to you when you enter it. This hall that we enter is similar to that of Valhalla or Olympus, a location where only gods reside, and a place where they go to almost retire. This place only really exists for us as the player to ask 3 questions all about the lore and the world of Fear and Hunger. So if you want more answers, you're going to have to play the game many times to get a clear picture of the entire lore of Fear and Hunger. As I said, the Grand Hall itself is just a location where the gods whose powers have started to wane and lose their attraction go to as a way to leave space for new gods. But they do seem to still harbor a lot of control of the worlds even beyond the shadows. Of course, the world of Fear and Hunger is one littered with stories of the occult. It's a world containing multiple gods, and in our case, a lot of old gods that no longer exist. Honestly, there are so many gods in fact in this game that it would take way too long to explain all of them, and I've already covered a few throughout our journey, except one in particular. So, the one ending that stood out to me the most is the one that I'll be showing right now. It's arguably the most important ending in the entire game, that being the ending of Fear and Hunger. So, this ending is very special. First things first, back in the castle of the Golden Temple, if we go to the back room during the present version of the world, we can actually find a big giant purple egg. Well, guess what? There were 2 more of these previously. If we go all the way back to the Thicket, we found another one of these eggs there, as well as one down in the catacombs. If we cut all of these open and then go back to the Cavedweller's village, you guys may remember there was a giant mouth that was previously closed. If we now enter it, we're inside of the God of the Depths. An ancient creature long lost to time. An old god, similar to Gorgoroth or Sylvian, but far less prevalent like them. The God of the Depths is one of revulsion and inescapable darkness. According to Rangvalder, the God of the Depths is worshipped by those who are forsaken and forgotten. Even the followers of the God of the Depths seem devoid of self-awareness or any kind of higher intelligence. An example of these are the scarabs we ran into a bit earlier. Funny detail is the design of the God of the Depths even mimics the look of a sunken ship found in our real world. Having entered his mouth, we find ourselves in the Gauntlets. Aptly named as such because here creatures roam that only exist in our worst nightmares, like a double-headed crow mauler or a bizarre fusion of Moonless with one of the guards. However, if we survive the gauntlet, it will eventually lead us to a mountain of bodies, upon which we will encounter something beyond comprehension. The little girl, the same girl that has been with us throughout our journey, well, it turns out she's the daughter of Nilvan. She is the god of fear and hunger. Apparently, the Ancient One is a soul that was created by the mating of Nilvan, the new god, and Legard, the half-god. By them doing a bit of humpy-humpy, in the process the girl came to be, and in her lays the dormant, the soul of the Ancient One. And she starts the battle by being fully mangled up. Each time her form changes, getting more and more unrecognizable, finally turning to its final deity version, no longer recognizable as really anything. However, there is a tiny detail. When playing the game much earlier in our playthrough, if we found that little doll as well as the little dagger in the backyard and handed those to the little girl, she will actually reminisce about those good deeds towards her and skip a turn with each phase during our battle against her, making the battle much easier to do. If we somehow manage to pull through and defeat her, she acknowledges us and we get our ending. Finding ourselves on level 10 of the dungeon, crawling out, we meet the god once more. We are told that we won't be leaving the dungeon and that something beautiful will be ushered into the world from down here. We then get to peacefully watch as Cahara passes away with mercy. This is honestly a heart-wrenching ending. The one ending with the most lore implications being that the God of Fear and Hunger is the newest one to be formed. It's the newest god to come to existence. And with this battle, she has ascended and ushered in a new era for humanity. We actually get to see this new era within the second game called Fear and Hunger 2 Termina, which I really would love to cover in a future video because it is such a cool game. So make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to justify me spending another 100+ hours on another one of these videos. There are also these special endings called S-ranked endings, and they're usually kind of the hottest ones to actually get, and each one of them relates to one of the 4 playable characters. I'm going to quickly run through them. The first one is Cahara's ending. This one has him going around the dungeon looking for treasures and eventually finding a golden crown. He can then sell this crown and he gets the good ending. Even the ending is referred to as the good ending because it's just Cahara getting enough money to get his wife out of the OnlyFans business and back into just being a good old wife and a good old mother. I guess that's really all I can say. The other ending, though, is a bit more grotesque. It's Darce's ending, and this one makes her go all the way down into the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger on the hunt for a resurrection spell to revive Legard after he dies in the dungeon. This one is kind of grotesque. It shows that no matter how horrible Legard is, even turning into a literal monster, Darce will still love him. Then, of course, we have Enki, who I've barely spoken about, but basically his ending has him connect himself with Nostramus. It's the weird, like, alchemy guy that you find early on in the mines. Basically, you gotta go around with him for a while, do a few side quests, and eventually you'll face off against a god version of Enki himself, which is really bizarre, and I did not even want to bother with this ending because I just don't like Enki, if you haven't noticed. Rangvalder's ending, though, is very based. What I mean by this is, to get this ending, you quite literally have to get every single soul in the game. What I mean by this is, you gotta kill every enemy type, every single boss battle, all of them. And if you do all this, you'll eventually get Ragnvaldr's special ending. Now, I'm not going to show any of these much. I'm not going to spoil them too much. I'll just recommend to check them out yourself, because there are tons of endings in this game that I haven't even covered, because I really think you should try them on your own. I do think the girl's ending, as well as some of the individual ones we see, all paint a clear picture. Fear and Hunger is a world ruled by mad gods, by occult figures and humans whose existence in itself is strange, as our purpose only seems to be to worship these insane deities. With the girl being the one to usher in a new era, she will sit atop the throne of ascension and bring us a new time. She brings upon the industrial revolution that is seen in Fear and Hunger 2. So, the gods sort of work in a weird way to push humanity forward, even at the expense of the multiple lives and the world itself. So, this leads me to my conclusion. See, Fear and Hunger is the kind of game where you learn something new every day as you play. I only covered the surface level of depth that exists here, but understanding a lot of the game's mechanics doesn't really help you. See, knowing how the items, enemies, and the world all works is not always enough to let you beat the game, because there's so many random elements that make the experience you have gained not always come to your aid. Also, did I mention there is a dating simulator mode for this game where you can romance Mauler? I mean, that's enough of a reason to play the game in my opinion. How do all of these elements of the game make it the perfect survival horror game? Well, the horror is obvious. The enemies are grotesque, ugly, and just bizarre monsters. The survival comes from learning after each mistake, using knowledge as your power, and of course, the craft system to your full advantage. And we can't forget the trial and error that constantly keeps you on your toes. Whereas other games will simply just respawn you close by, like let's say Silent Hill, which I frankly love as a franchise, but as a set of games, they aren't as difficult as Fear and Hunger. Fear and Hunger just doesn't give you that kindness of respawning close by, which is where it also becomes a difficult game. Combining all of these elements together, it makes it into my personal favorite survival horror game that I've ever played. It's both scary, difficult, and something I want to keep playing over and over again. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the dungeons of Fear and Hunger. So, this video took forever to make. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, then of course make sure you guys subscribe to the channel or become a channel member. We actually have our first channel member right now. A massive shout out to the Wendy God, who became our first channel member on the Blue Lad channel, so thank you so much. And of course guys, check out our Discord. It's all going to be linked down below, and I will see you in the next one.